from the Associated... Is this the one? Sorry. I now like to welcome representatives from the Associated Christian Schools, Alistair McPherson, Executive Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, and I understand Christine Hill, the Executive Manager of Educational Services at Carnegie, is here via video conference. Welcome, Christine, and welcome, Alistair.
Thank you.
You may have heard me ask people earlier in their submissions to avoid quoting people. I don't know if you are, but if they use unparliamentary language, the committee would appreciate if you could avoid doing that. And also, if you are going to name other persons who may not wish to be identified, again, I don't know if you're going to do that, but this is precautionary. I ask that you not do that. The committee would be grateful. Thank you. When you speak, the first time you speak, we would appreciate if you could say your name and your position for the benefit of Hansard that are recording the proceedings. Thank you. You can, either Christine or Alistair can open with a 5-minute statement, after which the committee will have questions.
Thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak to you regarding this bill. My name is Alistair McPherson. I'm the Executive Director, Public Policy and Advocacy for Associated Christian Schools. And with me today is Christine Hill, Executive Manager of Trinity Education and also a Director of Associated Christian Schools. At the outset, I do wish to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Our member schools and schools generally take significant steps to accommodate students on the basis of their gender. They routinely make accommodations regarding uniform, use of toilets, use of names and pronouns, sleeping arrangements at camps. This is an existing requirement of the Anti-Discrimination Act, but it also fits with the overarching desire of our member schools to provide a safe and supportive environment for all students, including transgender students, so that each student can achieve their full potential. Our member schools do not just do this because they are required by legislation to do so. They do it because of their genuine care and concern for all students. However, as we stated in our submission, our primary concern with the bill relates to the interplay with Section 41 of the Anti-Discrimination Act and the existing exemption for schools that operate for students of a particular sex. Christine Hill will be able to speak to you about the important work that's being done by Trinity Education Southside, an all-girls special assistance school working with young women, including many Indigenous women, who are disconnected from education and the impact this bill will have on that school. I want to note at the outset that the Department of Justice and Attorney General response to our submission at page 66 references a QHRC publication that suggests that a single-sex school for boys cannot refuse to accept the enrolment of a female-to-male trans student. We suggest that that's an oversimplification of the legal position and is inconsistent with the case law. The approach suggested by the department would render Section 41 as having limited effect. We say this cannot be correct or the intention of the Act. We note that sex is not defined in the Act, but we submit that it should be read as being different to gender, and that's the approach that the QHRC take in that very same publication in how they define gender and sex. We accept that this bill seeks to resolve that issue by providing a streamlined approach to changing the formal record of sex, and once this is changed, the person is to be treated of that particular sex. What we are asking you is to give careful consideration to same-sex schools and how the bill will impact them. Trinity Education Southside is a school that exists only for female students and specifically assists students who are disengaged. This is the final education option for many of them. Some have been victims of assault, domestic violence and coercive control. The college seeks to be a safe space for these students so they can complete their education and receive genuine care and compassion from staff. Males on campus can provoke a trauma response for some students because of their larger size and the previous trauma they have suffered. It's not a reflection or a suggestion that these males are dangerous, but it's nonetheless a genuine trauma reaction for these students, and Christine Hill can answer your questions further about this. What we're asking is that you bear this in mind and include appropriate protections to assist these schools to continue to operate for the purpose they were created. In saying this, we accept that there are other factors that will need to be taken into account, and there can be no one-size-fits-all. An obligation on a school to act reasonably, taking into account all the relevant circumstances, would, for example, be a suitable position. The reality is that schools do seek to act reasonably and responsibly, having regard to the best interests of their students. And for our member schools, that's consistent with their mission and purpose. Happy to answer your specific questions.
Before we go on, I just want to make a declaration, I guess. Christine, I understand Community College is in the electorate of Toohey. Is that right? On the south side?
My name's Christine Hill. I'm the Executive Manager of Education for Queensland. Queensland operates 5 schools throughout Queensland. We have one single-sex school, and that is Queensland Education Southside, which is located in Sunnybank.
Yeah, that's in my electorate, so that's my declaration. And I've been invited there several times, and I have organised trips into Parliament for some of the students.
Well done. Good on. I have a question, if that's okay, please.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'll hand over to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your submission. Is it my understanding that it's your view that this bill will prevent same-sex schools from making a decision as to who can come to the school? Is that essentially your view? Because I just want to point out what DJAG has said on page 65 of their written submission, and I'm really interested in your perspective on that. So DJAG has said that nothing in the bill prevents an organisation from applying for an exemption, and then goes on to say how that application may be made. And so what is your view in relation to the impact of this bill on same-sex schools and their ability to decide who comes to the school?
Well, the difficulty is that an application for exemption needs to be made to the judicial body, and that's subject to them accepting that application is reasonable in the circumstances, and it puts the school at additional cost to do so when the exemption is already there in the Act specifically for that purpose.
And is it your view that this bill would override that exemption? I'm just not clear on how it's going to interplay.
That's our concern, is that as it's currently drafted, it will, because the sex will be as regarded by the change on the birth certificate.
Okay, thank you. That's a question.
Sandy?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Just to give me better clarity, so for your all-girls school, obviously how you determine the makeup of the girls is through citing the birth certificate?
That's one of the ways that we determine that, yes. So we do request birth certificates from students.
All right, thank you.
Jonty?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alistair and Christine. I was interested more broadly in what your current process is for working with trans people. So if you had a student who was born a girl, attending a girls-only Christian school, wanted to identify as male, what would be the approach of the school in managing her enrolment, his enrolment?
Corinity and Christine can respond from the all-girls perspective, and I can respond from a general schools perspective.
So for our schools, because our schools are very small and our school at Southside has around 120 students, so that we have a community environment, because we're dealing with young people with trauma, we work very flexibly with individuals. And so we would certainly provide support. We endeavour to link any students who require counselling with appropriate bodies and provide students and their families with information and options to help them. Our school at Southside certainly respects pronouns of choice from the students. We have a non-gendered uniform. So the students have a polo shirt that they wear, and they can choose whether they wear trousers, shorts, skirts, whatever they're comfortable with that. So we don't have an issue with uniforms, and certainly we would continue to work with any young person who, whatever their particular concerns are.
So to be clear, the concern that you're raising is more around a person who was born a particular gender, particular sex, identifies as a different gender, wants to go to that gendered school, and your ability to refuse service.
It's an exemption that applies only at the point of enrolment, and so it's at that point where we would say that there's a need to consider the exemption. For students that are already enrolled, the exemption doesn't apply.
For that hypothetical student, they couldn't attend the sex that if they're not identifying as a female, for example, they couldn't attend a boys' school then either. So they would have to look at co-ed. Is that under your model?
That would depend upon the particular school that they're looking at, and that's why we're saying that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it's having regard to all of the relevant circumstances and why that particular school exists and what are the needs of that particular school.
Thank you. Jason? You're still on?
Oh. Yep, no, I'm here now. Alistair, is there, I may have misunderstood, so you can talk me through. So is there a concern that you talked about some of the young girls at some of the schools, or the school in question, might, as a consequence of their previous experience, be negatively impacted by the presence of a student who is transitioning? Is that correct, or have I got that wrong?
Broadly, that's correct, and Christine will be better placed to answer that within the context of this particular school.
Yes, within our context, we have quite a number of young women who have suffered from sexual assault, who've suffered from domestic and family violence. And in fact, some of the students actually live in relationships where there are concerns of coercive control. For some young women, because of these past trauma experiences and the overactive amygdala that they have, when they see a physically male person who is larger usually, or when they hear the tone of voice, the lower tone of voice of a male, that can cause a trauma reaction. Now, this is not something that can be reasoned with, because a trauma reaction obviously is a reaction. It's not a choice. And it certainly doesn't suggest that the males are dangerous in any way or we have concerns about the males. It's the concerns for these young women. And the very reason that they're not attending other schools is because of the presence of males. It's the same, that particular school has a predominantly female staff for very similar reasons, because we are trying to work with those young people to help them overcome that trauma so that they are again able to engage in normal society. However, that's their only option, is our school for disengaged young women.
Certainly. And I think you've answered my next question, which is, so are there male staff members employed at the school?
There are only a couple of male staff members.
Do they impact on does their presence there impact on the students?
Their presence can impact on some students, although because these particular male staff are very gentle and they are older gentlemen who who have more of a grandfatherly type role. We have a maintenance person, and also our English teacher is male, but we also ensure that those students who have the trauma, we have a youth worker who's there, able to be there with them in the English class as well, a female youth worker.
Thank you.
Laura or John? My questions have been answered. John T?
Yeah, I can ask a final question. So, Alice, it sounds like you're not disputing human rights acts, but perhaps, and principles in the Human Rights Act, but perhaps maybe disputing some of the clauses in the ADA around your ability to seek an exclusion, exemption from being able to discriminate based on gender.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair and Christine, for your written submission and also your attendance here today to give evidence to the committee. I'd now like to welcome the